Throughout history, there have been people who have committed some of the most heinous crimes fathomable. For those crimes, they have been convicted and sentenced to death. Welcome to Death Row Executions, where we take a look into the lives of society's worst offenders. And now, your host, Air.
Hello everyone, today's story is on Jesse Walter Bishop Jr., who was executed in the state of Nevada in the year 1979. Way back in the year 1924, the state of Nevada adopted a new method for its death row prisoners, which was the gas chamber. In 1977, there was one person executed, and his name was Gary Gilmore. There were no inmates executed in 1978, and in 1979, there were two people executed. John Spinkling was executed first in the state of Florida, and Jesse Walter Bishop Jr. was the second and last person to be executed in the United States that year. Jesse was the first person to be executed in Nevada since executions were reinstated, and Jesse was also the very last death row prisoner to die by the gas chamber at the Carson City Prison. Jesse Walter Bishop Jr. was born on March 1, 1933, in Glasgow, Kentucky, to parents Jesse Walter Bishop Sr. and Thelma Lowe Donaldson. Jesse had two siblings from his parents Jesse and Thelma, Morris Bishop and Augustus Bishop. When Jesse turned 5, his parents separated, and Jesse went to live with his father in East Los Angeles, California. He had 3 more half-siblings on his mother's side, who ended up remarrying to a man named Kenneth Woodrow Morris. His half-siblings were Darrell Lee, Connie, and Kenneth Morris. Jesse claimed that he would get assaulted by his father twice a year, no matter if he did something wrong or not. By age 15, Jesse was running the streets of East Los Angeles and ended up joining a gang. Now focused on being a thug and not school, he committed his first armed robbery at 15. Although he enjoyed the thrill of how it felt to commit an armed robbery, he tried to do something with his life, and he joined the Air Force a couple of years later as a paratrooper. He eventually took part in the Korean War and even earned a Purple Heart. Unfortunately for him, he ruined his chances of being honorably discharged because he tried heroin for the first time and ended up getting addicted. His addiction was discovered, and Jesse was eventually dishonorably discharged. Some accounts say that the only reason he got hooked on heroin was because he was injured in the Korean War during battle and doctors gave him morphine. Along with being dishonorably discharged, Jesse was also sentenced to serve 2 years at the United States Disciplinary Barracks in Kansas. After serving his 2-year sentence, Jesse returned to regular civilian life, and he also returned to what he knew best, a life of crime. He went back to drugs as well and got locked up multiple times for drug charges and robbery charges. In 1962, Jesse was busted for robbery, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. He was paroled in 1967, but was sent right back to prison a few years later in 1970. He was still addicted to heroin and also addicted to armed robberies. For this prison stint, he decided he did not want to serve his full term, so he planned an escape and followed through with those plans in 1972. He was not free for long because authorities found him and apprehended him, sending him straight back to prison. Jesse was later paroled in 1976, but the following year in 1977, he committed another armed robbery. Police knew he was their suspect, and there was a warrant out for his arrest. Because of this, Jesse left Los Angeles and made his way to Las Vegas, Nevada. Over the years, Jesse accumulated about 20 years spent in the prison system. On December 20th, 1977, Jesse decided he would go through with committing another armed robbery in Las Vegas. He was walking on the Las Vegas Strip and stumbled upon the El Morocco Casino. He walked inside of the casino and went straight to a female teller. He initially made a bit of small talk, but then he pulled out his revolver and demanded she give him money. The female teller screamed, and it got the attention of a casino pit boss, Larry Thompson, who was also equipped with a firearm. Shots were fired from both Jesse and Larry. They also both injured each other, with Jesse being able to shoot Larry in the stomach. Although the shots obtained by both men were not fatal or critical, screams were erupting in the casino, and it got the attention of 22-year-old Baltimore native David Ballard. David worked as a Volkswagen mechanic and had just gotten married 3 hours before Jesse arrived at the casino. He was enjoying fun by attending his wedding reception at the casino, but his fun was interrupted when he heard screams and cries. He chose to be a hero and ran into the chaos to see what was going on, and when he realized there was a man shooting carelessly, he tried to run away to protect himself, but by the time he made that decision, it was too late. Witnesses said that Jesse shot David like a dog. Unfortunately, David lost consciousness after being shot and was transported to the hospital, but he died on December 30th after succumbing to his injuries. During his stay at the hospital, he never woke up, and his wife never got the chance to say bye one last time. As for Jesse, he was able to steal $238 from the casino and fled the scene without being caught. Witnesses told authorities that they saw Jesse flee in a green car, and authorities were able to find the abandoned green car on December 21st at the Frontier Hotel. On December 21st, Jesse also robbed another man at the Union Plaza Hotel in downtown Las Vegas and stole this man's vehicle. Jesse knew the authorities were looking for him, and he still had warrants out for his arrest in California, so after stealing his last vehicle, he ditched it and then stole a pickup truck. Authorities were able to catch up with him while he was driving the stolen pickup truck, but instead of pulling over and surrendering, Jesse drove off to evade them. The cops lost Jesse's trail, and Jesse eventually ditched the pickup truck and stole another truck at gunpoint, and this vehicle still had passengers and the driver inside, so not only was he stealing a vehicle, but he now had hostages as well. With a gun pointed at the driver was too scared not to follow directions, and he drove Jesse wherever he instructed him to drive. When they got near a U.S. mail truck, Jesse decided to hop out of the vehicle that he was in with the hostages and steal the mail truck. The mail carrier was still inside of the vehicle and was instructed to drive Jesse around town, just like he did to the driver in the previous vehicle he stole. Jesse was now ready to steal his fifth vehicle. He got out of the mail truck and stole a UPS truck. After driving the UPS truck for a while, Jesse ditched the truck and started walking on foot. The manhunt was still on to catch Jesse, but authorities were not able to catch him that day. They finally caught up with him on December 22nd in Boulder City, Nevada, sleeping underneath a mobile home. When authorities pulled him from under the mobile home, they discovered the murder weapon on him. Jesse was different than he was the day before, and instead of choosing to get into a shootout with authorities, he surrendered without a fight. Jesse was then driven back to the city of Las Vegas so he could be locked up and charged for his crimes. Jesse's trial began not too long after the murder of David Ballard, and he thought that he would be sentenced to life in prison. His case, however, qualified for the death penalty because he killed while in the course of a robbery. Just 2 months after he killed David Ballard, Jesse was sentenced to death on February 10, 1978. It is customary for anyone who has been sentenced to death to receive an automatic appeal, but Jesse expressed that he wanted to die and was paranoid that he would be on death row for many years without actually being executed. Jesse even went as far as to fire his court-appointed lawyers so they would not prolong his case. His lawyers and anti-death penalty supporters felt that Jesse was not in his right frame of mind, but in Jesse's point of view, it made no sense for any death row inmate to say the death penalty was cruel and unusual punishment when the crimes that landed them on death row were cruel and unusual. He expressed that that was a very cruel and unusual thing to do to someone who has accepted their fate. In his own words, "They want to force me to appeal, to wait just so the lawyers can play their games. I feel that's cruel and unusual punishment. I never asked for the death penalty. They gave it to me. I'm only asking that they either give it to me or commute it." Many people who were for the death penalty were happy that he was willing to accept his fate, but disgusted with the fact that he never showed any remorse. With not showing any remorse, instead of staying quiet about his murder of David Ballard, he actually did interviews and spoke about the victim. He was quoted saying that David Ballard was a fool for getting involved with something that did not concern him. At that point, Jesse could no longer blame his thinking on being on drugs because he was on death row and clean when he made these statements about innocent newlywed David Ballard. In these interviews, he also bragged about his life outside of prison. He bragged about the beautiful women he had, the drugs he had, and the fancy cars he was able to obtain. And who knows if these cars were stolen with his track record. Jesse continued talking in his interview. "Now they got me dead bang on a cold murder beef I can't beat. I'm not gonna turn to God, or to snivellin' or snitchin' or rattin'. They got their gas chamber, they should get it over with." The Supreme Court of Nevada refused to reverse Jesse's sentence in his automatic appeal in 1979. On August 1st, 1979, Jesse was sentenced to die in the gas chamber and was given an execution date of August 27, 1979. 2 days before he was scheduled to die, on August 25th, Justice William Rehnquist ordered a stay of execution. The stay was eventually lifted, and Jesse's new execution date was set for October 22, 1979. Before Jesse's execution, he asked the warden if 3 of his wishes could be granted. He wanted one last intimate session with a woman, a fifth of Jack Daniels, and to be executed with dispatch, which means to be executed swiftly. His wishes were not granted, and the third wish could not be guaranteed. Although this last service was not a wish, Jesse was granted one last meal. For his last meal, he had filet mignon, salad with Thousand Island dressing, asparagus, a baked potato with sour cream, and a dessert. After eating, he asked if someone could tell the cook he did a very good job with the meal. He was then offered a phone call to make a last-minute appeal, but he refused. Outside of the prison, there were 75 people who were anti-death penalty, holding candles and reciting the Lord's Prayer. Inside of the execution area, there were 14 witnesses. Jesse walked in with denim trousers, a crisp white shirt, and white socks. He was strapped into his chair and smiled at the witnesses. The death chamber had a heavy metal door and was 10 feet by 10 feet. It was a gloomy place because it had not been used for 18 years. Jesse's final words to Warden Charles Wolf were, "This is one more step down the road of life that I've been heading for all my life." The loud, heavy door shut, and the pellets used for the gas chamber execution were dropped. Time is relative, so who knows if the execution was swift for Jesse, but it took 7 minutes for him to die. The first pellets were dropped at 12:14 a.m., and Jesse was pronounced dead at 12:21 a.m. After Jesse's death was announced, a Nevada district judge, Judge Pale Goldman, who was one of the 3 judges in the 3-judge panel who sentenced Jesse to death, spoke to the media and let them know that when he spoke to Jesse in August, Jesse admitted to him that he was involved in 18 contract killings involving drugs. It was also made aware that 2 days prior to Jesse being executed, he admitted in private that he was remorseful for killing David Ballard. My question for you all, why do you think Jesse was so stubborn he did not want to admit that he was remorseful for killing David Ballard? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch another episode of Death Row Executions, and I hope to see you for the next premiere.